Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. It is exactly 9:44 a.m. South African time. We've been to Syria, though we couldn't connect up with our guest there. We've been to Scotland, and now we move down to New Zealand, all in a morning, all in the past 2 hours, talking to people in the know about situations currently playing out all around the world. And our next guest in New Zealand, Christchurch, New Zealand, is John Minto. He is the national chair of the Palestine Solidarity Network, and we're going to be looking at the issue around the South African Rugby Union withdrawing or uninviting or disinviting the apartheid Israeli team after very, very strong calls for a boycott. A very good morning to you, John. Welcome to the program.
Yes, good morning, Julie. It's a pleasure to be there.
Lovely to have you on the show. And, I was just kind of thinking, what was SARU thinking? I mean, really? What were they thinking when they extended this invitation to the Israeli team? We understand that the invitation of the team, the BDS, the South African BDS coalition, which is an affiliate of the Palestinian-led Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions Global Movement, were absolutely outraged, and they called on SARU to disinvite or uninvite the apartheid team. And of course, we here in South Africa, we've just come through our dark years of apartheid 30 years later, but the memories are still very, very large, very hard, very looming in our minds. And here these guys go ahead and extend this invitation. Your thoughts?
Well, like you, I was absolutely stunned when I got an email from a friend in South Africa with a link to the news that this team had been invited. I honestly was absolutely stunned, and I sat down and immediately wrote a little piece because I was involved here in New Zealand in the campaigns in the 1970s and 1980s where we were trying to cut sporting contacts with South Africa, the old apartheid South Africa, as a way of bringing international pressure for change. And those campaigns were very successful. We did very much isolate South Africa in sport, and that had a very important effect in giving solidarity to Black South Africans and bringing pressure for change. We've got an apartheid system in Israel now where Palestinians are the victims, and we need to use the same international pressure on Israel to not just promote Palestinian rights, but to force the Israeli regime to change its policies and provide equal rights to everybody who lives in historic Palestine.
Okay, so thankfully, common sense prevailed. A moment too late, might I add, as far as SARU is concerned. So they've got egg on their faces. They've had to uninvite the team, and they're looking around to replace the team. What sort of lessons should we be taking from that very stupid situation of theirs?
Yeah, well, it was. I think SARU needs to have a serious internal look at what's going on in the organisation, when they could slip into that situation of supporting an apartheid team coming to Israel. Wouldn't matter where it came from, whichever part of the world. In the old days in the 70s and 80s. The South African Council on Sport, which was very much spearheading the sports boycott internationally, the South African Council on Sport said, don't send teams here to South Africa because you can't have normal sport in an abnormal society. And the same thing applies in Israel today. You cannot have normal sport in Palestine with a military occupation by Israel of the entire area and absolutely unbridled brutality being launched against Palestinians all the way through. The world is letting Israel off the hook. We didn't let the apartheid system in South Africa off the hook. We must not let Israel off the hook. So, yeah, I think the South African Rugby Union needs to have a close look at their internal policies. How on earth did this happen without presumably without the senior leadership of the organisation being very aware of it. At least I hope they weren't. So yeah, they need to have an internal investigation to find out how this could possibly have happened.
Well, let's hope a couple of heads will roll there and send out a very, very strong message. Undoubtedly, had that team come over, I think the matches would have been very, very strongly boycotted.
Mm,
You wouldn't have had, you wouldn't have had the numbers at the stadiums. But that
mm,
being said, you made a comment earlier on about the issue of the occupation in
mm,
Palestine and the conditions under which the Palestinian people are living.
mm.
Um, on a daily basis, all the different reports that we read, I can tell you as a South African myself, it is way worse. It is totally unimaginable what is playing out in that part of the world. We
Yes.
are, my generation of South Africans obviously were victims of apartheid, but very definitely not anywhere near to what we're seeing playing out in Palestine.
Mm.
So one needs to ask the question: why is the Western world and the rest of the world keeping mum on this issue? Is it about the superpower America calling the shots and funding the Israelis to the hilt?
Yes, I think that's it. That is certainly a key to it. Israel gives Israel enormous leeway, um, and the reason is that they want uh, an American ally in the Middle East, a beachhead in the Middle East, if you like, which can keep control of the whole Arab world. I mean, Israel does America's dirty work in the Middle East, and yeah, so yeah, America is certainly there. America's not doing this because they support Jewish people. They're doing it because it is in their strategic interest to have this country in the Middle East, and they are tolerating the most appalling behaviour by Israel simply because it's in America's interest to do so. So yeah, we have to be really clear about that. But at the same time, the pro-Israel lobby here in New Zealand, and in fact right around the Western world in particular, they use false smears of anti-Semitism to criticise anyone who attacks Israel, or who anyone who criticises Israel or Israeli policies. They say, "Oh, you're anti-Semitic." I mean, not just Israeli leaders do it, but in fact, right the way through around the Western world, the pro-Israel lobby is very successful in doing this. And so a lot of people keep their heads down because they don't want to be accused of anti-Semitism, when in fact by doing that, we're allowing this appalling human rights situation to go unchallenged. This is the longest military occupation in modern history by Israel, and the world or the Western world, which can have a much bigger effect than many other parts of the world, is refusing to give support. And I think we have to, as part of the solidarity movement here in New Zealand and in South Africa and around the world, we have to work together to strengthen the solidarity movement so that civil society, even if our governments won't, civil society will bring enormous pressure on Israel.
Absolutely. Of course, Israel are being paid good money for taking care of America's geopolitical interests in the Middle
Yes.
East. And I think that's no secret. The whole world knows about it. But I guess in time, things will have to change,
Yes.
whether, sooner or later, but we're all waiting with bated breath for that change. John, that's where we have to leave it. Thank you indeed for your time. Keep that flag flying as high as you possibly can in your part of the world, and
Mm.
hopefully we'll have more discussions in the future.
Kia ora, Julie. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. God bless. It is exactly 9:53 a.m. Standing by to talk with us is Hafiz Hussein Chunara, joined by Aysigul Aral, an AMA representative in Turkey. Please stand by. We'll be with you in a minute with that interview.